Okay, everybody, let's get started. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our Managing Your Practice Post COVID-19 webinar. This is a special webinar that we've put together to help you and your practice team start thinking about how to bring your practice back to a normal state of operation, whatever that normal may look like in the coming months. Now, before we get started, I really want to clearly state that when you reopen your practice is really going to be based on your state's restrictions and regulations, CDC recommendations, as well as your and your team's comfort and safety. Because this has never happened before, there really is no normal time frame within which you should be opening up your practice or returning to normal operations. We believe that this is going to look very different at each hospital. Now, if you're joining us and you're an IVAT 360 client, we will, of course, be here to help you determine the when and the how all this is going to work. If you're not a client, that's okay. We hope that this webinar is at least going to give you some ideas for things to be thinking about as you start to consider inviting your teams back to work and reopening your doors to your clients. So let's get started by taking a look at our agenda. Today, our webinar will be broken into 3 segments. Lindsay Rudder, one of our analytics managers, will be discussing weathering the storm and emerging from this crisis stronger, where you should be focusing from a finance perspective, and what to consider both now and later. Next, I'll be discussing some things to think about when bringing the team back together in the practice and how to keep them all occupied. We're also going to discuss transitioning back from curbside service to hospital side service. Then Kate Godshall, our senior marketing manager, will be discussing crisis response tools that you should already be using, as well as how to position your practice for success post-pandemic. At the end, we are going to be briefly answering a few of the questions that were asked during the registration process. This part is probably going to end up going a little over our 1-hour time slot. So if you have to log off, no worries, we will not have hurt your feelings. In addition, we have Kyle, one of our HR and training managers, manning the questions feed, as well as Jamie from analytics and Drew from marketing. You are welcome to ask questions as we go through the presentation, and they will answer as many as they can get through. Please be sure that you ask questions in the questions tab of your control panel instead of raising your hand, as we can't see any raised hands or any entries into the chats. They might not be able to answer all of their questions, but they're going to do their best. Also, I want to draw your attention to a few attachments that are on this webinar under the Handouts tab on your webinar control panel. These include a list of downtime tasks in a Word format so you can customize it for your practice, an AHA chart of accounts, and a Paycheck Protection Plan expense tracker to help ensure you get the highest possible loan forgiveness. Lastly, there is a return to work checklist. This provides many items that you should be thinking about when beginning planning your employee's return to the hospital after layoff or furlough. It's also helpful, even if you haven't laid anyone off, but to ensure your policies and protocols are sufficient for life post-COVID. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Lindsay to get us started.
Thanks, Heather. Sorry. Of course, I did that wrong. There we go. Perfect. So in order to weather the current storm and emerge a stronger practice, as Heather said, today we're going to focus on knowing your numbers. We're going to start by reviewing what has been happening in the veterinary industry as of late, and then speaking to where we should focus and some strategies that we can put in place. Let's first look at some industry-specific data. All the insanity around COVID-19 took hold of our industry in mid-March. We immediately started to see a decrease in transactions, which greatly affected overall revenue for hospitals. April started out very weak, but we are slowly starting to see signs of a recovery. This should hopefully be further assisted as restrictions are lifted, but do keep in mind that the economic impacts on our clients could continue for months or even years. Overall, month to date for April, practices are seeing a 19% reduction in revenue. Transactional volume is to blame here, with a drop of 25%. Although down across the board, the revenue categories which have been most impacted are unsurprisingly boarding, grooming, and dentistry. Of the 800 plus hospitals that we support here at IVET 360s, the ones that have weathered the storm the best are our full service Base Plus clients. These clients have been able to leverage the knowledge of our experts in marketing, HR and training, and analytics. During this trying time, marketing has been helping to facilitate quick client communication on change of protocols and safety measures, as well as the addition of services such as telemedicine and online pharmacies. Working with their analytics managers has helped hospitals to determine financial safeguarding methods and what areas to focus on in order to ensure meeting their break even. Finally, as you have all been exposed to in the previous webinar, HR has proven to be invaluable as new legislation around employees and leave are constantly released and updated. Looking at the data here for April, revenue for our Base Plus clients has declined 16.9% versus 19.3% for other hospitals. Similarly, transactions, which have seen a huge drop-off of almost 26% overall, have declined by 19.8% for our full-service clients. All the hospitals we support are able to access their own daily data on key performance indicators via our Pulse dashboard. To help the industry in this time of uncertainty, we are giving every hospital 3 months free of our data dashboard to ensure that they know and understand their own hospital numbers. We're hoping that this will allow you to take a deeper dive into the true health of your business. By knowing these numbers and really monitoring them and adjusting things in real time, hospitals will be in a much better position to be able to weather the storm. To answer the question on where you should focus, there's 3 areas that we're going to touch on today: cost of goods, labor, and recapturing revenue. For the next 10 or so minutes, I'm going to take you through each one of these in a bit more detail. There's a lot at the moment that is beyond your control, and I'm sure it feels overwhelming. In this moment, I would encourage you to focus on what you can control, and that is around expense management and setting out a plan to recapture revenue. You are pulled in multiple different directions as an owner or a PM, so keeping it simple is key. We're going to start with expense management. The 2 largest cost centers for any hospital are going to be your cost of goods or COGS and labor. Monitoring and controlling these two areas is key, not only during unprecedented times such as now, but also when your business is strong, as they are crucial in increasing hospital profitability and driving good cash flow. First off, COGS. What are COGS? They are any expense related to practicing medicine. Example categories are in general professional services, pharmacy, diet, and lab, to name a few. It's very important when you're benchmarking that you ensure you're comparing the correct expense categories for accurate monitoring. Many hospitals will combine these variable COGS expenses with more static operating expenses in their profit and loss statement. This can lead to an inaccurate assessment of your financial information. If you are unsure if expenses are currently categorized appropriately, I would encourage you to refer to that AHA chart of accounts that Heather mentioned is the download, as it clearly defines these. And while we're on that topic, it's essential that you have confidence in your numbers. Now, presently might not be a great time to go switching bookkeepers or accountants or moving bookkeeping to an external professional, but do keep this in mind and potentially make a plan to change in the coming months. COGS expenses are expected to fluctuate in dollars with revenue as these items are sold or services performed. However, you want to see stability in your COGS as a percentage of your total revenue. We recommend a benchmark of 20%. This means that your inventory and services cost relating to practicing medicine consumes 20% of your total revenue. So how can you impact your cost of goods? There are 3 main areas to look at: inventory management, revenue mix, and fees. We'll start with inventory management. We recommend having one person in charge of purchasing and limit the amount of orders per week and vendors. This ensures that duplicative efforts aren't being made, resulting in unnecessary product on the shelves or redundancy of products. Utilizing a COGS budget tool for product purchasing allows you to adjust purchasing levels as revenue changes. The tool will return your budget by taking last week's revenue and multiplying it by your intended COGS % target. This will give you a dollar figure to work towards when placing weekly orders. I will link to this tool and where you can access it at the end of this presentation. At this time, we do not see indications of supply chain disruptions, and therefore our recommendations remain the same, which is that clinics avoid bulk purchases. as they inhibit your ability to compare to benchmarks, and they can negatively impact your cash flow, regardless of how good that bulk discount looks. The most successful practices that we work with do not overpurchase, and they focus on running as lean as possible. During this crisis, most of you are probably utilizing the same strategy, but what I would encourage you to do is continue to adopt this way of thinking as we work back to our new normal. If you could continue to run lean, utilize budgeting, and avoid bulk purchasing, you will find that as your revenue begins to increase, you'll have a healthier level of cash flow and profit for your clinic. Next up, revenue mix. COGS will be impacted by the makeup of your practice's revenue. Growth in high margin areas, such as surgery and boarding, will help a clinic's COGS percentage, while clinics with a higher proportion of revenue from pharmacy and dietary products may have higher cost of goods as margins on these products are lower. Recently, as mandates were put in place asking people to stay at home and veterinarians to limit elective procedures, revenue in our surgical, dental, and boarding categories have declined. In contrast, you may have seen pharmaceutical and dietary purchases increase as clients were worried about running out of these products. Due to this, you may see your hospital's COGS percentage increase during this time. However, don't accept that as normal operating procedures. You should benchmark January and February COGS percentages to see your most recent normal trend. In addition to revenue mix and inventory management, COGS will also be affected by your fees. As vendors increase fees to you, you must increase your fees to clients to maintain an appropriate margin. If fees are not increased annually or at the same rate as your costs increase, your COGS percentage will grow as costs take up more of your revenue. Utilize your practice management software so that when vendors increase their costs, your prices are automatically reflecting this. In addition to these automatic margin increases, annual fee increases are an important part of any practice. We recommend practices undertake a non-shoppable service increase annually. This is generally done within the first few months of the year. If you haven't undertaken one this year, now may not be the best time, but ensure that you've got a protocol in place going forward to do so when it is appropriate and annually from then on. Next, we'll chat about payroll. Your labor expenses encompass gross wages for all staff in the hospital, owner, DVMs, and support staff. Benchmark for labor expense is 38% of total revenue. This breaks down to a 19% split for owner and DVMs and 19% for support staff. Similar to COGS, we're making available to yourselves our weekly payroll metrics tracker. It allows you to see how much of your weekly revenue is used to cover your support staff wages. A lean scheduling mindset is a must during this time where revenue has declined to ensure long-term viability of your practice, but it should also be taken forward to enable efficient staffing and drive profitability expansion. As we move forward to a new normal, you may start thinking about rehiring furloughed or laid off staff. Here's two things to keep in mind when considering rehiring: your hospital's daily break-even point and potential PPP loan considerations. Rehiring staff begins when you feel comfortable bringing them back to work, when it's deemed safe, and when the hospital revenue can support the added expense. While safety precautions are at your discretion as the owner, knowing when to rehire based on expenses and revenue can be tricky. One KPI to monitor is your hospital's daily break-even. This is the point where your revenue equals your expenses, resulting in zero profit. I won't go into this in detail as my colleague Jamie went through this last week, but knowing this number for your individual practice will help you to assess when you can start having staff return. I will link to more information about how to calculate this at the end of the presentation as well. For those who applied and were approved for PPP, labor expenses and staff headcount factor into your loan forgiveness. You'll want to weigh up maximizing loan forgiveness with the need to keep staff safe and healthy during this time when the revenue may not support a fully staffed hospital. Also, keep in mind that at the end of the 8 weeks of loan forgiveness, if revenue is still suffering, layoffs or furloughing may be a necessity to maintain the long-term viability of your hospital. Whether you receive relief funding or not, managing your controllable costs are key to hospitals' profitability now and in the future. My hope is that as we come out of this crisis, some of the tools and strategies that have helped our clients can be taken forward into your regular day-to-day. The ultimate goal of our analytics team is to help our clients increase the profitability of their hospitals, and these tools are two key parts to affect what are the largest cost centers in any practice. Now on to recapturing revenue. What can you do now? COVID-19 and increased restrictions has found our teams having to shift to a new way of practicing, as well as cancellations of elective procedures and wellness visits. What we have all been met with is a reduction in our revenue, and this is another area on top of cost management that we want to focus on, particularly as these restrictions do start to lift. It's imperative, if you haven't already, that you have a protocol in place for rescheduling procedures or appointments your hospital has canceled that haven't been forward booked. This means sitting down with your team and laying out who will be responsible for contacting clients and figuring out how, if you're not currently tracking these, do we find those patients. For wellness visits and vaccines that have had to be canceled, you'll want to utilize your practice management software or reminder platform to run a list of overdue and upcoming annuals. Depending on availability of staff, you may choose to do this via phone or by sending emails to those clients. If you have forward book clients, keep in mind many of them may have forgotten the new appointment date and time in the midst of everything. Ensure your practice is sending out pre-appointment reminders so you don't have an increase in your no-shows. Many states have asked for non-essential procedures such as dental prophies and spays and neuters to be postponed. You may have also had clients call to push these appointments due to safety or economic concerns. To be in the best position going forward, we need to come up with a plan to contact these clients and not just wait for them to take the initiative. Remember as well that driving growth in these higher margin areas can help your COGS percentage. Depending on your practice management software, you may be able to run reports in these circumstances. If you're continuing to cancel these procedures and are not forward booking, think of possibly utilizing your practice management software to keep track of any client who will need to be rescheduled. This could be a COVID-19 specific reminder or a code that you invoice onto their pet's file. Then, when you're ready to start rebooking, you can run a report specifically for this code or reminder and have your list of clients to contact and book in. With changes in the way that you've been practicing and the move to curbside service, there has justifiably been a bit of a shakeup with how your teams are working and communicating, and this is likely to continue as split teams are brought back together. Make sure you are monitoring and checking in with your teams so we don't start to see an increase in mischarges because of communication breakdowns. If you feel this might be an issue at your practice, consider undertaking some chart audits and thinking of measures to limit this risk. This also relates to discounts, which is a big issue in our industry. You will no doubt be feeling sympathetic to clients who have fallen on hard times, but we need to be continually reflecting on what those discounts would mean to the practice. Don't allow this to be a time where these get out of hand, and you may want to relook at any current discounting policies for clients or put a policy in place if you don't have one already. Now more than ever, we need to be charging appropriately for services performed to ensure practice sustainability. As this has had an enormous impact on the revenue of your practice, so has it on many of our clients. We need to keep in mind that their ability to afford veterinary care may have shifted over the last few weeks and months. With that in mind, if you don't currently have options in place, ensure that there is the ability for your clients to access some sort of payment plan to cover vet costs. Whilst we do not recommend facilitating this at the hospital and building up accounts receivable, what is ideal is leveraging companies such as Care Credit or Scratch Pay to ensure you are capturing as much of the revenue for your hospitals as you possibly can. In addition, if you currently offer wellness plans, ensure that these are readily marketed to your clients. They are a great option for them to help spread out the cost annually and allow you to have recurring revenue coming into your practice, whilst they also ensure that you can continue to provide the best standards of care for your patients. While we are nowhere near back to pre-COVID-19, we need to start thinking about our new normal and what that means for your practice. By knowing your numbers, utilizing cost management tools to make timely decisions, and focusing on recapturing revenue, you're going to put yourselves in the best position for sustained viability and long-term health of the practice. I'll now pass it back to Heather.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. So let me actually exit out of there. Oops. Okay, so now let's start talking about some HR and training issues that a lot of hospitals are going to be facing now that we are considering how to bring people back to work. So first, I want to discuss one of the HR issues that's on a lot of hospitals' minds, which is getting the team back together. Now, nearly all of our team members have been living in a strange world, which I'm sure is not a very big surprise to anybody on this call. We've had to lay people off. We've had to put people on furlough. We've had to have limited contact with clients and with each other, in part due to curbside service. Actual curbside service itself has been disruptive, reduced or otherwise altered hours, reduced or otherwise altered services, and so much more. This is in addition to the stresses that everybody in your practice, yourselves included, have been dealing with on a day-to-day basis at home. Now, after months of dealing with this, we now have to find a way to bring them back to the hospital and get them working together as a team. The problem is this isn't really as easy as just putting people back on the schedule. In addition to recalling employees, we need to worry about team members who don't want to come back from furlough, which we have more information about recalling and dealing with people who don't want to come back at covid19.ivet360.com. But also those who may feel resentful of those who took time off to care for the kids, or those who have been home theoretically making more money on unemployment than those who have been working. We also will see people on a spectrum of those who don't feel the need to protect themselves, which some hospitals have been dealing with, or others who are still terribly afraid to leave their home. This very complex situation is going to be creating one of the most difficult team conundrums that most hospitals have ever faced. So how do we actually get the team back together working harmoniously? I wish I could say that it's going to be easy, but it's not. It's going to be very difficult. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be difficult moments. And there's going to be times where you think, you know, I should just shut this whole thing down. But we will get through it. And I want to give you some suggestions on how to create a culture of understanding in the hospital. So on the first day back in the practice, you should be holding at least a 1-hour all hands meeting. Now, I know that this means blocking off time in your schedule and paying people for not actively working. I also know that not all of your team is going to come back on the same day. So you might have to have this meeting several times over the time that you're bringing people back from furlough. I know that that means taking time out of your schedule. However, this is going to be hands down the most important time for your team. So at this meeting, you're going to want to really get into the emotional effect of the recent pandemic. We need to understand everybody's individual thought process behind things. If we don't understand each other and understand where we're coming from, then people are going to have a very difficult time hearing everybody else when something terrible comes up. So I recommend disallowing any negative comments about coworkers from here on out. If you walk into the treatment room and hear the technicians talking about another technician who had to take time off to take care of their child, or somebody who they don't believe is truly sick, it's your job as the practice leader to shut that down immediately. And you can say, hey, we don't talk that way about coworkers. How can we reframe this conversation? And we'll talk about reframing in a few minutes here. I also recommend requiring anyone who has an issue with anyone else in the hospital to come to a member of the leadership team instead of talking to each other. Now, a lot of times there's not going to be anything you can do about their issue. You know, if Susie is upset that Timmy has taken time off, you're not going to be able to say, well, let's bring Timmy back then, right? But you can help to reframe how that individual is thinking and encourage them to control the things that they can control. And when we're talking about creating a culture of understanding and kindness, that's going to be a key thing that you're going to want to tell your staff about is, yes, there's going to be things that we can't control, and they're going to frustrate us, and they're going to make us want to pull our hair out, but we can't control them. So put those away, don't think about them, and focus solely on the things that you can have some kind of an impact on. Next, I want to make it clear that your role has just gotten a lot difficult in your practice. Your role is no longer just the hospital owner or just the practice manager. Now you get to be the chief empathy officer. And it's kind of unfair to you as the practice owner or practice manager because you've got your own family stuff that you're dealing with. You might be educating your own children at home. You might be dealing with sick family members. Plus, you're dealing with trying to keep your practice afloat during this time. But unfortunately, right now is the time when your team needs you to be the absolute best leader that you've ever been. And the way that you can do that is by creating empathy in the practice. So I recommend starting by asking the difficult questions. And you can ask these questions during your all hands meeting. You know, when you're talking about being honest about the state of the practice and being honest about your feelings, and everyone else is being honest about their feelings, you can ask some of these really difficult questions. So for example, ask yourself, am I leaving each member of this team genuinely cared for? Right now, more than ever, people want to know that you care about them as a human being. They want to know that you empathize with their situation, even if you are not having the same experience that they are. So after each interaction, did I leave this team member feeling more genuinely cared for, or did I make them feel less cared for? And if it's the latter, you're definitely going to want to revisit that conversation with that employee and do what you can to help them feel that you care about them. You can also ask yourself, are there any team members who have been disproportionately affected by this crisis? Every workplace has a spectrum of people who have been affected in some way by the crisis. Some people have just been kind of annoyed that they have to stay at home all the time. Other people have lost numerous family members, and they've had to deal with numerous family members being sick. And on top of that, they're having to educate their child and try to do some form of self-care. Those individuals are the ones who would be considered disproportionately affected by the crisis. And in this situation, they are the ones that you're going to want to extend extra understanding to, because they are dealing with an emotional state that a lot of us cannot even begin to comprehend. So if you recognize that there are team members who have been disproportionately affected, those are the ones that you can sit down every once in a while and say, hey, how are you feeling? How are things going? Those personal conversations can sometimes be very difficult for people in the veterinary field to have, but right now they're very important. And when you have those conversations, be sure that you just sit and listen. Don't try to solve their problems for them. Don't try to give them suggestions to make it better. Sometimes they just need you to listen. You can also ask the team directly, how can I be more supportive of you as we make this transition? Or how can the hospital provide more support for everybody while you make this transition? Keep in mind that not everyone is going to have a really great idea. Some people's ideas are going to be very self-serving, and you don't have to do everything that they say. But if they ask for something small or something that wouldn't be that difficult for you to do, then I would recommend giving it a shot and trying to implement that for them. And then I also recommend asking your team on a regular basis, saying, you are so important to me and to this practice. I want to know how you're feeling right now. Asking somebody how they're feeling is much more impactful than saying, how are you doing today? Because you're asking them to share a part of themselves with you. So instead of somebody saying, yeah, I'm doing okay today, if you ask them, how are you doing? If you say, how are you feeling right now? They can say, you know, I'm a little bit tired, or you know what, I'm having a really difficult day right now. I'm having to cope with a lot. And so that lets you know, okay, maybe we need to back off this person for the day. Or maybe if you're slow, maybe that person can go home for that day. And then the last question here, what do we all need to make sure we are being supportive and empathetic right now? Support and empathy look different to different people. And so you want to make sure that you kind of get the wide spectrum of ideas behind this to make sure that you're supporting people and they're supporting each other in the way that each person needs it. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, one of the things we have to be is very self-aware. So this means that we have to identify the things that are bothering us. We have to understand how we are feeling on a given day. So if you, as a practice owner or practice manager, show up for work one day and say, you know what, guys, I'm really stressed out today. I'm just going to be quiet and I'm just going to get some work done. That tells your team to back off of you a little bit. And you want to give your team the freedom to also be very self-aware and let you and the rest of the team know when they're having a difficult day too. We also need to make sure, as I've already mentioned, that there is a lot of empathy and understanding. Now, understanding is going to be difficult for some people because some people are going to be very annoyed that one person got to take time off and collect unemployment and probably make more money than the rest of the people who were working. But we need to help them understand that that individual was probably dealing with a situation that the people at the hospital would not even want to dream of dealing with. So we need to make sure that we are instilling in our team a level of empathy and understanding for each person's individual experience with this virus. And next, with emotional intelligence, it's very important to label our fears and our frustrations. Now, for practice owners and practice managers right now, there's a lot of fear that the business is going to suffer, or that we're going to lose clients, or that the transition from curbside to hospital side isn't going to work out properly. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I am afraid that this is going to happen. And right now, from a mental standpoint, this is going to help you get through some of the difficult times that are going to lay ahead as we start transitioning back to some state of normalcy. If you're frustrated with an individual person, you can say, I am frustrated with the fact that Susie is still afraid to leave her house. However, I understand that this is her experience right now, and I need to drop what I can't control. And then changing internal thoughts. So internal thoughts are one of our worst enemies when it comes to emotional intelligence, because they're the ones who can speak up when you're trying to say, I understand that this person is having a difficult experience. Your internal thoughts are the ones who will take over and say, no, she is a terrible human being and we need to fire her immediately. And so we need to change these internal thoughts, and especially the internal thoughts that create actions. For example, yelling and snapping at people. If you feel like you're about to have an outburst for whatever reason, and sometimes it might be deserved, right? Sometimes a technician might overstep the line, or sometimes a receptionist might make the same stupid mistake again and again. But instead of yelling or snapping, which is usually going to be our go-to response when we're stressed out, instead, you can ask others for creative solutions. So if you've got that receptionist that keeps making the same stupid mistake over and over and over again, you can say, hey, you seem to be struggling with this particular thing. What ideas do you have so that you don't make this the mistake in the future? We can also help to change the internal thoughts of our team as well as our own internal thoughts. So for example, I can't believe Susie is taking more time off. We can instead encourage people to think, and encourage ourselves to think, Susie must have a lot that she's having to deal with right now. Now, again, right now, there are going to be some people who are taking advantage of unemployment, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but always give people the benefit of the doubt. And then finally, you're going to want to make sure that you label your emotional reactions. So it's okay to say, I'm really angry with so-and-so, or I'm really sad today because my mom is sick, or I'm really angry that my kid can't go to summer camp right now. Labeling your emotional reactions helps your brain to file them appropriately and reduce your reactivity as a result of them. And then focus on the things you can control, and then just let go of the rest. There's going to be a lot of things over the next few months that are going to make you want to lose your mind. Ask yourself, is this something I can have control over? And if you can't, I know this is hard to do because a lot of us are control freaks, but if you can't control it, just let it go and only focus on the things that you can actively control. So what do we do with all these people? The Paycheck Protection Plan meant that you had to bring furloughed employees back. But the problem is that a lot of hospitals, not all, but a lot of hospitals, there's really not enough work for all of these people to do. So what do we do with all these human beings? Well, first, we recommend downtime tasks and training. So in the handout area of your webinar control panel, there is a downtime task list. Most of these tasks are not fun. We're talking, clean the drains, painting, really boring things, sometimes gross things, but they're things that need to get done. And they're things that usually people find an excuse not to do when things are a little bit busier. Now, the list is a Word document, so it's completely customizable for your practice. We didn't want to just give you one list that you couldn't change or you'd have to write handwritten changes to. And you can either assign tasks to team members or you can have the team select them. We've got a couple of hospitals that, I don't know if all of you have seen that one, The Office episode, where they put all of the gross tasks on a Wheel of Fortune wheel, but I've got a couple of hospitals that have done that, and that's how they're assigning tasks. And it's almost like a game. It's kind of silly. We also recommend training and performance conversations right now. So a lot of hospitals are behind on performance evaluations. If you've got some extra time, get those going. There's no better time than right now to get people moving on the right path. Performance evaluations do not necessarily mean wage increases. It's a way for you to provide feedback to your team to help them make improvements to their performance. And since right now they might have some extra time to learn things, to refine their skills, this is a great time to have those conversations with them. Also, if you're not doing routine one-on-ones, there's never been a better time to start these, especially if you've got some extra time. Now, I know some hospitals are overwhelmed right now. There's waiting lists and you cannot get enough people in the door right now. Maybe right now is not the time for you to start one-on-ones. But if your practice is a little slow, this is a great time to start one-on-ones with all these team members that you've got in the practice. If your team doesn't have any defined goals, start defining them and then help each individual work towards them. So their goals can be small things like placing an IV catheter or drawing blood from a jugular vein, or they can be really big, like becoming an RVT or becoming a certified veterinary practice manager. And then lastly here, you want to train. So a lot of hospitals talk about how they want to do cross-training, but they don't ever have time to do it. If you've got all these people in the hospital that you've brought back from layoff and not enough clients for them to see, start doing some cross-training. The team is going to appreciate any training that you give them, and there are a lot of studies that show that providing training can seriously increase your team's loyalty to the practice. So it really helps you in a number of different ways. You can also have either doctor or supervisor-led training sessions, and these can include things like wet labs. They can include, here's how we put new patients in the computer. Here's how we invoice clients. These don't have to be done by you. They can be done by a doctor. They can be done by a supervisor. They can be done by the practice manager. They can even be done by a star receptionist or a star supervisor who's not necessarily, or a star technician who's not necessarily a supervisor. You can also invite drug reps in. Drug reps are chomping at the bit for something to do right now because sales are down for a lot of them. So you can invite them in for some lunch and learn time. And then there's also online training. There's learningvet.com, which right now we're offering free trials of learningvet.com. So you can email us at hello@learningvet.com and we can get you set up for one of those trials. And then there's also @Dove. So Learning Vet focuses more on communication and client service skills and supervisor skills. And @Dove is very good at the clinical stuff. So how to place an IV catheter, how to monitor anesthesia, that kind of thing. But these options should provide you with enough things to provide your team to do that you shouldn't have people standing around doing nothing. So lastly here, let's talk about transitioning from curbside to hospital side. So a lot of people in the registration process asked, when do we return to normal? Or isn't this too early to be returning to normal? And in some cases, yes, right now is probably too early to be returning to normal. But we want you to start thinking about how to return to normal. So normal is going to really vary from hospital to hospital. So some considerations that you should think about as you're thinking about reopening your hospital. Number one are your state and local restrictions. If you are, for example, in California or Oregon Right now, we are not allowed to have clients in the hospital, so we can't reopen our hospitals here. If you are in a state that is lifting the restrictions, then you're going to want to look at the CDC recommendations, because in many cases, the states are opening up way too quickly, and you're going to be putting your team at risk if you start having clients in the hospital. So take a look at the CDC recommendations. Talk to your team, see how they feel about clients starting to come into the hospital, see how they feel about returning themselves to the hospital. Also, you want to consider your ability to continuously safely distance from each other. This is something that we saw in the Spanish flu, where people started getting together again way too quickly, and that caused Spanish flu to spread exponentially higher. So you want to make sure that in your practice, you don't have clients start coming in unless you have a way to safely distance them. And then another key consideration is whether your clients are ready to come back into your hospital or not. Your clients might be just perfectly fine right now with curbside service because your clients are just as afraid of contracting COVID-19 as the rest of your team is. Now, some hospitals are going to start seeing in-practice clients much sooner than others. Some hospitals are going to want to continue seeing curbside service. Now, I know that many hospitals will be asking clients when they make appointments whether they want in-hospital or curbside care. Making this an option is going to help bring back clients who are still wary of coming into your practice, more willing to bring their pet in for some form of care. Now, we've heard from many hospitals that they would like to continue seeing curbside appointments exclusively. Now, this might seem like a really appealing option. You may want to really think twice about it. Many clients are expressing a very strong dislike of curbside service. A big particular issue is the perceived lack of value. Clients place a really heavy value on face-to-face time with their vet. So curbside service means that doctors and techs are spending less time with the client themselves. Many clients who want a higher level of service may not hesitate to bring their pets elsewhere if they feel they're not getting the same value or quality of care through curbside service. Now, when you start bringing clients back into the hospital, you're going to want to phase it. You don't just want to open the doors and let everybody in all at once, because that's going to create pandemonium. So instead, you might want to make it an option. So you can start by allowing emergency clients or sick pets or euthanasia clients in, and then slowly transition to well pets. And that'll help make the transition much smoother for you. Now, obviously, this is a decision that each practice is going to have to make for yourself. There's no template or precedent for this, which means there's really no right or wrong answer. So what we recommend is sitting down and creating a plan with the understanding that the start date for that plan is going to be really fluid based on the restrictions in your area. So a few things to consider for your plan is timeframes. Do we continue curbside service even after the restrictions are lifted? What are our indicators or benchmarks to move toward hospital side care? Having those benchmarks defined are going to help make sure that you are able to implement this at the right time. Do we do a slow integration, or do we just go full steam ahead? Do we want to start with some clients, or do we want to let all clients in? Creating a plan now will help make sure that you're able to better implement it when the time comes. And then which groups do we start with? And what is our benchmark to know that we can continue to the next group of clients in hospital? And then do we continue to split teams, or do we transition slowly back to full staff? Some hospitals are enjoying having these split teams because it means that they have less payroll hours, especially right now if client flow is slow. So if you have not gotten a Paycheck Protection Plan loan, this might be a good option for you. Otherwise, you're going to want to start transitioning back to having full staff in the hospital. So now let's go ahead and hand it off to Kate for marketing.
Thank you, Heather. Hello, my name is Kate Gottschall. I'm a Senior Marketing Manager with IVET360. I'm going to be bringing up the tail end of the presentation today and talking about marketing as we move out of coronavirus and into the post-COVID age of consumerism. You've probably heard some common themes through the presentation from both Lindsay and Heather, and have likely noticed by now that the philosophy of IVET 360 is really based on a holistic three-prong approach for optimizing practice performance in all three areas, including HR and training, finance and business development, as well as marketing. So we offer these services standalone, but we've seen, like Lindsay presented in the data, that by far the practices that are most successful and have best weathered the storm during COVID have been one that have utilized all three of our services together. So I have just about 10 minutes today, so we're going to dive in and talk about really looking at marketing post-COVID in the landscape in the coming weeks. We are really going to just scratch the surface of this, but be aware that there will be a full marketing webinar presentation that's going to dive a little bit deeper into this in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if you have any specific questions about what we talk about today, please feel free to throw questions into the chat function or shoot us an email at marketing@ivet360.com. Okay, so before we can really talk about what to do post-COVID marketing, we need to stop and better understand the impact that this has had and how the pandemic has fundamentally changed the way that you guys and everybody essentially is doing business today. So things happened very quickly in most parts of the country, and chances are you may have found yourself struggling to keep up. The key to success during the crisis is really being able to adapt quickly and effectively to rapid change situations. Not only adapting, but making sure that you're effectively communicating these changes and continuing to engage your client base during the crisis. COVID-19 has also forced many practices, whether you want to or not, to really embrace technology and stretch your client services in ways that you never likely thought was even possible. Maybe that was through telemedicine, through simple video chatting, texting, or even just presenting treatment plan presentations over the phone. The pandemic has also significantly impacted consumer behaviors and has changed the way that consumers are interacting with brands, and especially how they're consuming goods and services. If you've paid any attention to media, you've noticed the shift in consumer engagement is present across all platforms and all industries. More importantly, though, the shift in advertising from COVID-19 has now created this global expectation for the way in which we communicate and interact with each other. This expectation will likely persist well beyond the pandemic, and it really needs to be incorporated into your marketing engagement strategy moving forward. Finally, too, at a time where corporate consolidation in industry is at its highest, we know that a strong systematic strategy and really a data-driven approach is going to be the key for small, independently owned and operated practices to stay competitive in this market and in a changing market. So let's take a look at your crisis response checklist. Just a real quick recap, essentially, what should your practice already be doing right now? And likely you've implemented a lot of these tools and practices already. So you've likely shifted to hands-free or low contact client interaction, taking advantage of online or virtual tools for client communication. So we mentioned video conferencing, telemedicine. You also should be heavily promoting your online pharmacy, not only to promote compliance and make sure that clients and patients are continuing with preventative measures, but also maintaining a revenue source from prescription medication sales and prescription food sales, bringing that back to the practice. You should also effectively be managing your digital presence right now to make sure that you're quickly communicating changes in hospital protocols, including changes in business hours, taking advantage of special COVID-19 advisory tools that are being offered to you from reputation management sites like Google and Yelp. Adjusting your digital advertising to reflect changes in operations or promote new relevant services or client tools that are going to make you more competitive during the crisis. So for example, if you're offering telemedicine, if you have expanded business hours, these are things that you should reflect in your current digital advertising. You should also really be monitoring your reputation management sites, including the big four, the Google, the Yelp, Nextdoor, and Facebook. Your reputation management really begins in the practice, and this dovetails nicely off of what Heather was talking about with maintaining morale and supporting your staff. The maintaining client service standards in your practice and openly and effectively communicating changes in your protocol will help avoid frustration from your clients that could tend to lead to a negative review online. Some review platforms like Google have temporarily suspended reviews, but you should always be making sure that you are monitoring those reputation sites and responding to negative reviews quickly when they arise. Finally, you should be actively engaging your community and client base through newsletter communications, through your reminder platform, and through your social media channels. Your content should include updates of changes in operations and services, definitely a reiteration of your safety protocols, and most importantly, the available services that you have right now available to clients. So for example, you really should be communicating the importance of maintaining parasite preventative through shelter-in-place orders or maintaining vaccine protocols. There's been a boom of new dog, cat, puppy, kitten adoptions during COVID-19. So we want to make sure that we're starting those pets off on the right foot and making sure that they're getting in for wellness exams and maintaining those vaccine schedules. You also want to make sure that if you're communicating to your clients that you are in an area where you're allowed to provide certain services like dental prophies or spay and neuter surgeries, you want to make sure that you are taking into account perceptions and concerns from the client base and communicating that through the use of autoclaves. For example, you're able to sterilize and reuse PPE in the hospital for these procedures, and you're not taking away from the critical need for these supplies from human medicine. So again, being open and transparent with your clients is key. So looking at positioning your practice for success in post-COVID-19, we have 5 pillars that we look at that are really going to set you up for success. And again, we're going to go through these pretty quickly because we're up against a time wall here. First one, first and foremost, is client community safety, right? This is going to be a big thing moving forward. COVID-19 has given us all a very heightened awareness in terms of health and safety. And this is likely going to carry through the pandemic. Clients are going to have a new expectation from your practice that you're not only providing the best care for the patients, but you're keeping them safe as well while caring for their pets. Like Heather mentioned with her staff, clients are also going to be really leery of coming and snapping back into business as usual. We may find that clients don't want to sit in a lobby with 10 other people. They don't want to interact. They may have a fear of coming back and doing that. For example, I have a hospital that I work with in Georgia, and famously on the news, you probably have seen that the state of Georgia has released some of their restrictions and are starting to go back to business. But this hospital is choosing to maintain curbside pickup and drop-off appointments through June because they feel that's the best in keeping their staff and their clients safe. So expect to continue your protocols for a while post-pandemic, right? Like Heather mentioned, it's not going to be a jumping right back into business as usual, and we're not going to open the floodgates and have everybody coming back into the lobby. We want to make sure that we're prepared for any rolling stay-at-home orders that might come if the virus flares up in certain communities. As the situation evolves, above all else, make sure that you're quickly communicating these changes to clients and promoting your safety protocols and services that you're retaining for client peace of mind. So if you're going to continue providing curbside pickup for 3 to 6 months, we want to make sure that we are actively communicating that as an option to our clients. You can take action now. So creating safety standard operating procedures that you can implement quickly at any time. Also take this opportunity right now to really listen to your clients. Ask them what they need from your practice to feel safe and to continue using your service. You can utilize free survey tools online like SurveyMonkey, Survey Planet, or even a simple Google form that you send out to your clients to ask them what they need from you in your practice. Our second pillar is flexibility. So maintaining your flexibility post-COVID-19 is key. It's unlikely that you're going to go back to business as usual, again, like we mentioned. So being nimble is what's going to allow you to stay ahead of your competition. Be sure that you're planning for a proactive approach right now, because being reactive certainly can be a waste of time, energy, and funds. We know anecdotally from the hospitals that we work with that those that were proactive when the pandemic hit saw much less revenue and new client loss than those that were reactive and were struggling to catch up. Again, you can take action now. So making sure that you establish a really strong chain of command so that you can make decisions quickly and efficiently. This is a huge benefit of being a privately owned practice where you can make these decisions quickly. Just like with hospital operations, you want to plan for SOPs for client communications as well. Identify a social media manager in your practice who can handle getting information out quickly and effectively on your social media channels. Make sure that your critical information is centralized, including logins for your business listings and client communication tools. How many of you may have struggled in the past several weeks trying to locate the login for your Google My Business account or your Yelp page or anything to make updates like that? So having all that in a centralized location will make those go faster. Finally, if you can, identify a trusted partner. You don't have time to worry about a lot of these things in the hospital. You are an owner, you are a practice manager. And like Heather said, you're now a chief empathy officer. You have a lot going on. So if you can identify a trusted partner like IVET360, that's where we come in. We take a great deal of this worry off of your plate so that you don't have to spend time and energy on these minor details. If you're not in a position to be able to have an outside partner like IVET360, then delegate some of these duties internally to your staff members that you trust. Make sure that being able to make these communications to your clients goes as quickly and smoothly as possible. The next pillar, and probably the biggest pillar, is increasing accessibility, right? So making sure your practice and your services are more accessible will be key post COVID-19. So making sure you have multiple ways for your clients to connect and communicate with you. This will be an expectation after this pandemic is over. If you've implemented telemedicine, consider keeping that and building on that service. The easier you are to communicate with, the more likely you will be to acquire new clients, especially the younger demographic, as well as retain existing clients. Like Lindsay mentioned, accessibility also translates to how clients will be able to be financially access your services and consume your service as well. So more than 30 million people have filed for unemployment benefits during this crisis. So you need to be aware of how clients are not only emotionally and socially impacted by this, but economically as well. So taking action right now, you want to make sure that you are maximizing your quote unquote searchability quotient, right? So this is how easy are your services to find and access. A good mobile friendly website with robust search engine optimization is critical now more than ever so that you're easily searchable online. Are you dominating the search engine results page with a combination of that SEO with search engine marketing like Google Ads and claimed, verified, and engaging social media channels and business listings? All of this works together in concert to really maximize the real estate that your practice has in search and making you visible now when people potentially are looking for your services. Do you have easily accessible options online for things like new client forms, curbside pickup, patient history forms, appointment requests, ordering prescription medications or food? Some hospitals have even implemented online payment gateways so that clients can pay online through the website, or even telemedicine or video conferencing options linked to your website. You also want to make sure that you have a robust client communication strategy. With compliance tracking and re-engagement campaigns being critical to recouping lost revenue from the pandemic, it's important to not only have a reminder platform and a communication strategy, but ensuring that you have more than 40% adoption in your reminder platform and more than 70% capture rate of client emails. You can't connect with clients on their terms if you don't have these items. So finally, again, like Lindsay mentioned, recognizing the financial hardship that this pandemic has had on clients. So you really want to be promoting financing options that you have available in the hospital, like care credit, scratch pay, quad pay, things of that nature. Also having the opportunity for hands-free payment through Apple Pay or Google Pay gives clients peace of mind when it comes to safety and checking out in your hospital. Also, if you have wellness plans in your practice, like Lindsay mentioned, this is a great time to really promote those and promote the benefits of not only annual wellness care, but being able to budget and spread out the cost of yearly veterinary care over the course of 12 months. The fourth pillar that we're looking at is really embracing innovation, right? So you've probably heard it before, but post COVID-19, it's going to be even more important for an industry that's been historically resistant to change and embracing technology. You really can't afford any longer to resist new concepts. So listen to your clients and listen to what they're asking for when it comes to technology, right? So don't create any unnecessary barriers between you and potential clients by being unwilling to adopt technology into your practice. Definitely make sure you're leaning on the data as well. It's going to show you what's working from a marketing perspective. Oftentimes, this industry decisions are made on gut feelings instead of data, and we see this all the time with resistance to new client offers like free first exams. So the data is really going to tell you when your marketing efforts are working and when it's time to focus on something else. So taking action now, you can track your marketing efforts using data to drive your decision making by using tools like call tracking that will give you exact new client opportunity numbers, which is especially critical if you rely heavily on print marketing, where the only way to track that really is with call tracking lines in landing pages. Landing pages in Google Analytics will give you valuable data on user behavior, and tools like the Pulse dashboard offered from IVET 360 will give you better ability to track top-level practice performance metrics to understand which marketing efforts are more successful than others. And like Lindsay mentioned earlier, we are offering 3 months free of that Pulse dashboard, and you can sign up for that at the covid19.ivet360.com. And finally, the last of our 5 pillars is to engage your community, which includes both prospective and current clients. The loyalty of your current client base is a key factor in the success and growth of your practice. The time and effort and money that it takes to retain clients is far less than that used to acquire new ones. So take care of the clients that you've got. Understand the know, like, trust concept, which is a fundamental concept in any business development, right? So it's based off of the premise of introducing yourself to the market and get known, have a strong digital presence, target your approach and your marketing efforts. You don't need to be known by everybody, just the right consumer. Once you're known, then be likable. Make sure that your hospital's voice is real and authentic. Your blog posts and your social presence should be unique and engaging. You don't want to have the same social media posts as 1,000 other hospitals across the country. You should be having two-way conversations with your clients and the community. Especially now, you want to be relevant to what's happening in the world. You don't want to be tone deaf with your communications. And once you're visible in the community, you want to be generous and supportive if you can. That's going to help you build trust. Building trust also means being consistently good at patient care and client service. Share your testimonials, monitor your online reputation sites, respond to negative reviews, and apologize when you need to. Give your clients a reason to come back to you year after year. So heading out of COVID-19, it will be important to take action by engaging your community with strong education content and social media engagement, promoting things like referral programs and loyalty programs to really lean on your best champions, which are your most loyal clients. We need to be looking at dedicated compliance communications to really recapture revenue lost during the pandemic, and working to formulate re-engagement campaigns to bring clients back into the fold, and perhaps even drive larger margin services like dentals. Even think about reintroducing clients to underutilized services or those that were hit hardest during the pandemic, like boarding and grooming. And finally, be open to new world communications, right? Consider incorporating video into your social strategy, at-home pet tips, special messages from the doctors and staff. A couple of my hospitals have done personal messages regarding coronavirus or COVID-19 hospital protocols, and those videos far outperform just basic social media posts. And once this all blows over, don't discount the benefit of true face-to-face interactions, right? Those are going to come back. For example, I work with a practice that has a partnership with a local brewery where they do monthly puppy socialization happy hour classes that really brings clients together. And this is a great opportunity once restrictions are lifted and it's safely to do so, to really bring the community together, to interact with your brand and provide a nice social opportunity for folks. So we're at about 11:04, we're a little over. So that was a brief overview of marketing post-COVID era. Sorry, I had to go through that pretty quickly. We, again, will be offering a more in-depth hour-long webinar just on marketing in the coming weeks. So be sure to watch for that. And then again, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them for you. Just shoot them over to marketing@ivet360.com. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Kate. So I know that it's 5 after 11, so many of you are going to have to jump off. We do want to answer some of the questions that came through on the registration that you guys all completed, because there were a lot of really common themes that we want to make sure that you guys have some answers to. So if you can stick around, we'd love to have you. This should only take about another 10, 15 minutes at the most. So question number 1, I have a team member who needs to take leave to care for a child whose daycare has closed. She is refusing FFCRA leave and wants to apply for unemployment instead. Is this even possible? The answer here is absolutely not. This would be considered a misuse of unemployment. The FFCRA leave exists solely to prevent people from having to take unpaid leave and collect unemployment. However, many employees realize that there is potential right now to make more money on unemployment than on leave. That does not make it an okay use of unemployment. So you can give this employee 2 options, and this works for any employee who wants to go on unemployment, who's asking for a furlough when they in fact qualify for FFCRA leave. Number 1, they can take the provided FFCRA leave. This makes them ineligible for unemployment. Or option 2, resign her position entirely. Now, most people are not going to want to leave their job permanently, so this usually solves the problem. If this employee were to resign, then she becomes ineligible for unemployment anyway because she was offered work and has declined it. Now, if you have an employee who is doing this and they do resign, or if they want to take the FFCRA leave and you still get an unemployment claim, make sure that you decline that unemployment and fight it if she ends up getting awarded unemployment, because you don't want your unemployment account to be affected because you've got people who are abusing unemployment. Question number 2, some of our exam rooms are very small. How should we manage that when we have clients back in the hospital? And this one came up several times as well, and I've gotten this question over the last couple of weeks too. Now, until social distancing guidelines are removed, we would really caution against using those exam rooms if team members cannot be at least 6 feet away from clients. Now, some hospitals only have very small exam rooms. So in these situations, that's going to be a little bit more complicated for you. In some cases, it may mean continuing to do curbside service and telemedicine for quite some time until social distancing guidelines are removed. We have seen a few hospitals that are setting up gates and chairs outside of the exam room. So a gate is placed across the doorway, and then the client sits in a chair just outside the exam room, and then the doctor and the technician do the exam in the exam room. Now, obviously, this is not ideal because it takes away from privacy during the exam, but it could work for hospitals or for patients who need to be seen in the hospital and you have no other options available. So kind of keep that in your back pocket. But otherwise, I would recommend just sticking with curbside service and telemedicine until the social distancing guidelines are removed if all you have are very, very small exam rooms. Next question that we got a lot of is, what other recommendations are there to keep staff and clients safe when we reopen? Now, there's many different considerations for this. And you should definitely check out the CDC website because they have many tools for businesses to help with these kinds of questions. However, we would recommend the following for these situations. So number 1, ensure that clients are not allowed in the hospital until the CDC states that it is safe to do so. Now, again, some states are lifting the restrictions. However, the CDC is still very strongly recommending the social distancing guidelines. So when in doubt, we would recommend going the route of the CDC as opposed to state and local government. When there's any doubt whatsoever, we recommend looking at all of the recommendations and going with the one that is the most safe and the one that you are the most comfortable with. Next, you're going to want to make sure that team members stay at least 6 feet away from any clients. Now, you cannot require your team to stay 6 feet apart from each other while working on patients because it's nearly impossible for somebody to restrain an animal and have somebody else 6 feet away drawing blood. It's just not going to happen. So in those cases, team members should be wearing face masks and gloves whenever possible while at work. Now, I know that personal protection equipment is in short supply right now. Some hospitals are autoclaving gloves, which we can't recommend necessarily because it's not something that, disposable gloves are labeled to do. But I would recommend taking whatever sanitation processes you can to reuse those when you need to. If you have the option to provide new masks and gloves to all employees, great, awesome. But we are realistic to the fact that not every hospital is going to be able to do that. So when possible, require them to wear masks and gloves and then try to sanitize or sterilize those whenever possible, preferably after each patient, but at the very least, a couple times per day. Next, make sure the exam rooms are thoroughly sanitized after each exam. Now, this could mean that you're going to have to schedule longer appointments in order to accommodate this because it can take 10 to 15 minutes to completely sanitize an exam room because we're not just talking about spraying down the table and mopping the floor. We're talking about spraying down the wall behind the chair. We're talking about spraying down the chair that the client sits in, wiping the underside of the table because a lot of times people's fingers make their way to the undersides of the tables, cleaning out the sink, wiping the front of the cabinets. This can take much longer to do, and the larger your exam rooms, the more time it's going to take. So you might need to schedule longer appointments to keep those appointments on time to allow time for sanitizing. Next, any clients who are showing symptoms of illness should be asked to stay in their vehicles. So if you have a client that comes into the hospital and starts sneezing or coughing, or their eyes are red, or they look like they're really sick, you can tell them, I need you to go stay in your vehicle. And you can say that as nicely as you can put it, but do whatever you need to do to get that person to go back to their vehicle and do a curbside visit instead. The nice thing is most people are going to be expecting that. You are going to have some clients who are going to get real crabby about that, but you have to do what you need to do to protect your staff and also protect your other clients. And if a sick individual comes inside, then your team's going to have to sanitize any area they came into contact with. So on the reminder phone calls and when a client is making an appointment, once clients are allowed to come back in the hospital, we would recommend telling them if you or anyone with you is showing any signs of illness, we will ask you to wait out in your car. I'd recommend creating an actual policy that the hospital staff can ask any client to wait outside the clinic if they are symptomatic. You can also have a policy that states that only one client from a family is allowed in the hospital at any time. However, keep in mind that you may need to break that rule for situations like euthanasia, where sometimes the entire family wants to be there. So like Kate was saying, we're going to need to be a little bit flexible sometimes when possible, but always make sure that protecting your staff and your clients are at the top of your priority list. Question 4. We are one of the lucky practices that are so busy that we have waiting lists for clients who want an appointment. How are we ever going to catch up? And that's a good question. It's going to be different for every single hospital, but we do have a few suggestions that maybe you haven't thought of, and maybe you have thought of all these things. And if you have, then I would say hang in there for the long haul. But some things that you can try is number one, finding people who would like a temporary position. Right now, there are a lot of people who are on furlough and on layoff, and people who've been permanently laid off who are looking for a job. So you can put some ads out there. You can reach out to other hospitals and say, hey, have you furloughed anybody that would be willing to come work a few shifts a week with me? You can also, if you call other hospitals, say, I promise I will not hire that person on full time. And you can make a pact with those hospitals that you won't hire somebody else's employees on if they're only on furlough. But it's a way for those individuals to make a couple extra dollars, and it's a way for you to increase the number of people in your practice. You may also be able to find doctors who are on furlough and want to work relief shifts. A lot of hospitals have had to furlough and lay off doctors. So there are many of them out there who might be interested in working some relief shifts, especially because of the fact that unemployment for doctors does not usually cover their much higher salary. You can also consider expanding your hours or be open on Sundays or expand your weekend hours. Most employees don't like working on Sundays, but right now we kind of have to do the rally cry of we're all in this together and just get through it. And so you can let your team know, we've got a list of 100 clients that we need to get in. So for the next 3 months, we need everybody to take turns working on Sundays. We're all in this together. Buy them pizza on those Sundays, whatever you need to do to make them happy. You can also work on paying overtime for people who want to work additional hours. So if you expand your hours and you've got some people who want some overtime, whereas you do need to watch your labor expense, and I don't want to go against anything that Lindsay said, if you are this desperate for appointments, then this might be an option to do for a very limited time until you get through that list of people that want appointments. You can also ask your doctors if they want to work additional shifts in exchange for days off in the future. We've seen lots of hospitals create those kinds of arrangements for times when things are really busy or when they need to cover for other doctors who are out of the hospital. And some doctors are very happy to do that because it increases their production in the short term and it gives them a couple extra days off later on in the year. In very, very extreme cases, you may need to think about shortening your appointment times for rechecks and vaccine boosters. So patients that maybe don't need a full half-hour appointment or don't need a full 20-minute appointment, maybe you can schedule quicker 10 or 15-minute appointments to get those clients turned around faster. Now, again, this decreases the value that these clients are going to see in your service. But if you're at the risk of losing clients altogether because they can't get an appointment, then that might be an okay temporary measure to take, as long as you let clients know that in the short term, we're shortening appointment times for rechecks and vaccine boosters. But if we need to see your pet for longer, we will see them for longer. Question 5 is more of an analytics question. So I'm going to let Lindsay take this one.
Thanks, Heather. So the question is, our state has a clause in the law that says that employees who do not feel safe may stay home. Will that affect our Paycheck Protection Plan repayment? The answer is, unfortunately, yes. PPP forgiveness will be reduced if your FTE headcount is not matched during the 8-week forgiveness period with that of your application. As I mentioned in my presentation, you'll want to weigh up maximizing that forgiveness with having just bodies in the hospital. Although Heather did lay out some really good options for what to do with staff members. You may want to try and find temporary workers to fill those slots to keep your FTE numbers at the appropriate level to maximize that forgiveness. Keep in mind that if your loan is not fully forgiven due to this decrease in headcount, it is still a very low interest rate at 1%, and you have 2 years to repay that loan. For some additional information on maximizing your PPP loan forgiveness, you can visit our COVID-19 website at covid19.ivet360.com and refer to the article, What's Next After PPP Approval. And I'd also recommend speaking to your lender to get some additional details as well as the legislation continues to change around what forgiveness will look like.
Thank you, Lindsay. Question 6. Some of our team members' FFCRA leave is going to run out, but their children still don't have daycare yet. What can those people do? This is kind of a hard one because they really only have a couple of options. Number one, they can resign their position. If they resign, they're not going to be able to collect unemployment. And that's really difficult because a lot of us have, a lot of sympathetic feeling towards individuals who are in these tough situations. But this can be a way to get them off of your payroll and get them able to get their life in order and get childcare in order. And you can always offer to rehire them once their situation is in a better place. Or they can find alternate childcare. So they can ask a parent or a friend. I've heard of some hospitals who are having some individuals take care of other team members' children. So the people who are working on Monday, they leave their kids with the Tuesday workers for the day and they pay them daycare wages, and vice versa. These are options that you can make available. We don't recommend having daycare in your practice because daycare, which usually consists of more than 3 children at a time, requires state approval and licensure, and odds are you're not going to get that licensure. And if something were to happen to one of those kids on your property, you would be liable for a very large amount of money. So we don't recommend having on-premises daycare. Now, refusing to return to work, even if it's due to a lack of childcare, is unfortunately not an acceptable reason for collecting unemployment. We don't recommend furloughing this person because this is considered a misuse of unemployment funds. That's the same as somebody resigning and then saying that they were fired just to collect unemployment. So we would not recommend doing this. We would recommend having that person either resign their position entirely or work with them to find alternate childcare. Question 7, how do I motivate my team to work harder or work faster while we try to catch up with this client load? So we have a bunch of recommendations. First of all, be brutally honest with your team. Your team does not want to hear you talk about how great it is when they know that it's not. Your team has a BS meter that detects any lie from a mile away. So just be honest with them. Say, yeah, this is going to suck. This is going to be really difficult, but we're going to do this together. We are in it together for better, for worse. And if we all work together, many hands make light work. Usually that's enough to kind of get the team going in the right direction. Sharing successes with the team can also help with that. Now, food is always a great motivator and it's usually fairly inexpensive. Pizza usually does the trick. Donuts, usually a big win. But make sure that you take credit for it. Don't just say there's donuts in the break room, but instead say, I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing to keep this practice afloat right now. There's some donuts in the break room as a token of my appreciation. Because otherwise it becomes almost like wages where they feel like they're entitled to it as opposed to it being a sign of appreciation. You can also do wage increases when possible. Some hospitals are doing temporary wage increases. Again, you don't want to throw the balance of your payroll off too badly, but if you can provide some kind of a wage increase while still maintaining a reasonable payroll percentage below 20%, that might be an option for you to kind of keep people's spirits a little high. These can be temporary wage increases as long as you tell them this is a temporary wage increase for the next 3 months while we get through this nightmare. You can also do little gift cards. Everybody loves gift cards. We found that gasoline cards and grocery store gift cards are 2 of the most appreciated gift cards that you can give people. You can also do appreciation events. So you can say, if we get through the next 3 months together, then we're going to have a big party at the end of it. Or I'm going to take you all bowling, or I'm going to take everybody out to a bar, whatever type of appreciation event works for your specific team. It gives your team something to look forward to and something to work towards. And then there's also team building. Team building doesn't have to be big outings. It can just be little things that you do on a day-to-day basis. And we have a large library of team building activities. So if you're an IVAD 360 client, please reach out to your HR and training manager because they can provide you with a whole bunch of ideas on day-to-day team building to keep your team's spirits really high. Question 8, we furloughed many employees. Can we pick and choose who we have come back to the practice? Technically, yes, you can. However, you have to be really careful not to make choices based on any factor that could be used as a discrimination claim. So for example, if you've got 3 employees on furlough, one is a white male, one is a white female, and one is an African-American female, and you bring back the white male and the white female, it would be extremely easy for that 3rd employee to claim racial discrimination. So if that's the case, if you've got people who are in protected classes, which right now, to be honest, nearly everybody is in some kind of a protected class, right? If that's the case, we don't recommend picking and choosing who comes back. We do have a really good article called Recalling Furloughed Employees at covid19.ivet360.com. This would be a good place for you to start thinking about your furlough recall list. And then the last question, how do we hold on to new clients who came to visit us because their old clinic was closed? So beyond providing exceptional patient care and client service, the real key here is going to be effectively integrating them into your client and community engagement and communication strategy. So like Kate had mentioned earlier, this is going to include making sure you have all of their contact information captured in your system, especially cell phone numbers and email, and making sure that they're actively using your communication tools like reminder platforms and pet care apps. Post COVID-19 client communications should always circle back to your differentiators and your key service points to educate these clients what makes your practice stand apart from your competitors. So that is the end of our webinar for today. Lindsay, Kate, Drew, Kyle, Jamie, and I would all like to thank each of you for joining us. We know that you have a lot going on in your hospitals right now, and I really hope that you have found this and all of our webinars to be a helpful and valuable use of your time. As always, we have recorded this webinar. The recording and the slides and all of the handouts will be available at covid19.ivet360.com no later than tomorrow morning. Be sure that you stay tuned to our COVID resource site, also covid19.ivet360.com, as we regularly post really important information to help your practice through this crisis. We're going to have more webinars to come, so don't forget to sign up for those when they become available, and we'll have announcements on our COVID website. If you have more questions specifically about HR, you can also sign up for our HR COVID support, which offers you unlimited access to our veterinary HR team for answers about your COVID response. My email address is also on the screen here. We would love to hear any feedback you have on how we can improve these webinars or make them more valuable or helpful to you. As always, thank you so much for everything you're doing to keep your employees safe and keep your practice doors open. We know that your job can be a particularly thankless one, but know that you have all of our utmost respect and admiration. Thanks again, take care, and stay safe, everybody.